Welcome back to another episode of Utica TV. I'm your host, Nico Leonard, and this week we'll be walking around campus asking people if they hypothetically had a time machine, where and when they would go with said time machine. Let's get going. All right, so if you had a time machine, when and where would you go back to?
1960s Cuba.
Why?
My family's from Cuba.
So you just want to see your family back then?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's a great answer. Thank you, man. All right, Zeke. If you had a time machine, when and where would you go?
I was contemplating saying something about going back to meet my Malcolm X, but that would be a lie. I would go back to 1971 when the Jets won their first Super Bowl, Joe Namath, and celebrate. But, I think I would go back in time to see when my parents were in high school. I feel like that would be cool. Party with them and stuff like that. That would be cool. They went to Walton High School in the Bronx, so they used to throw sick parties over there. So that would be where I would go.
So you don't want to go back and see the Jets win the Super Bowl?
Screw the Jets.
It was a rough weekend. If you had a time machine, where and when would you go?
I would probably go back to high school and enjoy myself more in that time with my friends and probably try harder at school.
So why high school specifically?
Because that was when everything counted the most, and I felt like life was easier a little back then, and just moments with your friends are just irreplaceable.
Absolutely. Thank you. So Mikhail, if you had a time machine, when and where would you go?
I would go back to 2018. I don't remember what month it was, but that was the year because I used to play cricket, that was the year my school, we went to the semifinals. We kind of went into a three-headed playoffs because we were all tied on the same points. So we had to replay everybody again, and then we ended up playing the same team that we beat in our first game. But in that final playoff game, they beat us, and I cried. So that was the year I would go back to kind of fix that, because we made a lot of mistakes in that game, and if we had fixed that, we would have won.
If you had a time machine, where and when would you go?
That is a very good question, where and when. Where I would probably go into the future, maybe 1,000 years or so, to say, to see how far we've advanced and maybe see if we do have flying cars and stuff like that, like people in the 1900s thought we would. So that's what I would say.
Would you go to Utica 1,000 years from now?
I would, because I'd want to see where Utica is in that time period, because obviously we'll all be gone by that point, but it's how will Utica have advanced? What will the buildings look like? Will we still have Utica University here this, so I don't know.
So if you had a time machine, where and when would you go?
Probably go back to pre-K.
Pre-K?
Yeah.
Really? Why pre-K?
Life was just so relaxing. There was no issues. Mm-hmm. Just good memories. Friends you don't see anymore, you saw then.
Life was simpler when we were kids,
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
So I would go back to 1986. I'm a big Mets fan. So to see them win the World Series out of all these years where they get all the hype, they think they're going to do really good, and then they suck, it'd be nice to actually see them win the World Series in person.
Andres, the question is, if you were to hypothetically be in possession of a time machine, where and when would you go with said time machine?
I would go back to November 22nd, 1963, and stop the assassination of U.S. President John F. Kennedy.
Why?
I don't think that one's that hard to explain. I just, don't really want a president to die. I think he was a great man for this country, and I would not want him to get assassinated.
Thanks for joining us for this week's episode of Utica TV Question of the Week. I was your host, Nico Leonard, and we'll see you next week.